The glow below in Lake Erie. The first thing that hit Captain Elias Vance, stepping onto the deck of the Wee Lady, was the smell. Not the usual tang of fish and diesel, but something thicker, cloying, and profoundly wrong. It hung heavy over the pre-dawn water of Lake Erie, near Kelly's Island, a miasma of decay and brine gone sour, undercut with a sharp, almost chemical bitterness. It was the smell of the algal blooms, sure, but this was different, deeper, older, like something vast and forgotten had stirred in the mud and exhaled. "Reeks like hell's outhouse, Cap'n," muttered Benji, his first mate, spitting over the rail. His usual joviality was absent, replaced by a tightness around his eyes as he scanned the flat, gun-metal expanse. The NOAA buoy report had predicted calm seas. The water, unnaturally still, reflected the bruised purple of the retreating night like oil. "Something ain't right," Vance agreed, his voice gravelly. He fished Lake Erie for 30 years, weathered its notorious sudden storms, cursed its dead zones, and respected its hidden power. But this stillness felt predatory, waiting. "Keep an eye on the sonar. Bottom's been acting squirrely lately." They were chasing walleye, supposedly running thick near the old limestone reefs offshore. Vance needed the haul. Bills were piling up like driftwood after a storm. The Wee Lady was his life, his father's before him, and he could feel the old girl groaning under the weight of his desperation. He throttled up, the diesel thrumming a nervous heartbeat against the unnatural quiet. The sonar screen, usually a comforting dance of fish arches, and the lake bottom was a mess. Fuzz, phantom readings that flared and vanished. Deep gouges, impossibly large, scored the digital mudscape. Benji tapped the screen. "Look at that, Elias. Like something big dragged itself through there." Vance grunted, unease coiling in his gut. Old wreck shifting, maybe. Or just the goddamn zebra muscles messing with the signal. He didn't believe it. The gouges looked fresh, purposeful. He cut the engine, letting the Wee Lady drift into position. The silence that descended was absolute, oppressive. No lapping waves, no crying gulls. Just the thick, rotten smell and the low hum of the sonar's distress. They dropped their lines. The weighted jigs vanished into the inky water. Minutes stretched. Nothing. Not a nibble. Erie was rarely this dead. Then the glow began. It started deep down, a sickly pulsating green. Not the gentle bioluminescence sometimes seen in warmer months, but a harsh, toxic emerald light that seemed to pulse upwards from the abyssal mud. It illuminated the water column in fitful bursts, revealing swirling sediment, strands of thick algae like rotten hair, and shapes. Benji saw them first. He gasped, a strangled sound. "Elias, below us." Vance leaned over the rail. The green light flared again, stronger this time. 20, maybe 30 feet down, silhouetted against the eerie glow. Things moved. They weren't fish. They weren't anything Vance had names for. Humanoid, but grotesquely distorted. Gaunt, elongated torsos seemed boneless, swaying like kelp in a current that didn't exist. Arms ended not in hands, but in clusters of thick, barbed tentacles that trailed phosphorescent slime. Their heads were bulbous, eyeless orbs, smooth and obsidian black, reflecting the sickly green light like malevolent marbles. Where mouths should be were circular, lamprey-like suckers ringed with needle-sharp, translucent teeth that seemed to glow from within. They moved with a horrifying, unnatural grace, drifting just beyond the reach of the boat's lights, their tentacles stirring the silt. One passed directly beneath the hull. Vance saw the puckered, scarred flesh along its flank, patches that looked disturbingly like barnacles fused with rotting skin. It turned its featureless head upwards. Vance felt a wave of primal terror, a cold certainty that it sensed him, not through eyes, but through some other, more invasive sense. Pressure, smell, hunger. "Jesus wept," Benji whispered, frozen in terror. What? What the hell are they? Nothing good, Vance rasped, hand instinctively going to the flare gun clipped near the wheel. Get the lines up, now. We're leaving. But it was too late. The green light intensified, flooding the water around the boat. The creatures, previously drifting, suddenly oriented towards the wee lady. Their movements became purposeful, swift. They didn't swim. They propelled themselves, jetting water from vents along their sides with disgusting, wet squelches. They converged. A heavy thud shook the hull. Then another. From below, a sound like grinding stones vibrated through the deck plates. The scrape of chitinous limbs against wood. They're trying to sink us. Benji screamed, finally snapping into action. He scrambled for the gaff hook, his face white as bone. Vance grabbed the radio. Mayday, mayday. This is the wee lady. Position near Kelly's Island shoal. Under attack. Unknown hostiles in the water. Repeat, under attack. Static hissed back, thick and distorted, swallowing his words. He tried again, desperation clawing at his throat. More static, then a faint, garbled transmission cut through. Avoid, area, glow, containment breach. Repeat, containment. Before dissolving into noise. Containment breach? The words chilled him deeper than the lake water ever could. What had been contained down here? A tentacle, thick as a man's arm and glistening with foul slime, slapped onto the deck near Benji. It whipped around, the barbed end embedding deep into the wooden gunnel with a splintering crack. Another followed, snaking over the transom. Then another. The creatures were climbing. Benji swung the gaff hook with a yell. It connected with a sickening thwack against a smooth, obsidian head. The creature didn't flinch. The head seemed to absorb the blow, the surface momentarily rippling like tar. The tentacle attached to it lashed out, wrapping around Benji's leg with terrifying speed. He screamed, a raw sound of agony and terror, as the barbs dug deep. He was yanked off his feet, crashing onto the deck. "Benji!" Vance roared, abandoning the useless radio. He grabbed the flare gun, fumbling with the safety. The creature hauling Benji towards the rail wasn't alone. Two more had breached the deck. They moved with a horrifying, disjointed gait, their boneless limbs folding and unfolding like grotesque origami. The stench of brine and deep decay was overwhelming. Vance aimed the flare gun at the creature, dragging Benji. He pulled the trigger. The flare erupted with a hiss and a blinding red light, streaking across the deck and impacting the creature's torso. It didn't explode, didn't catch fire. The flare stuck, sizzling, embedded in the rubbery flesh. The creature shuddered, a low, guttural groan vibrating from its unseen mouth, a sound that seemed to resonate in Vance's bones. It released Benji, recoiling, the flare casting monstrous, dancing shadows. The green luminescence beneath it pulsed erratically. Benji scrambled back, blood soaking his pant leg, his eyes wide with unadulterated horror. The other creatures hesitated, their blank heads swiveling towards the wounded one and the sizzling flare. Vance saw his chance. "Engine! Now!" He bellowed, lunging for the helm. He slammed the throttle forward. The wee lady's engine roared in protest, then caught, surging forward. The sudden lurch threw the creatures off balance. One tumbled back over the rail with a heavy splash. Another clung on, its tentacles flailing, tearing chunks of wood from the gunnel. Vance spun the wheel hard, putting the wounded creature between him and the others. He aimed the boat towards the distant, barely visible lights of Marblehead. The lake ahead was now alive with a toxic green glow, patches of it swirling like malevolent will-o'-the-wisps beneath the surface. Shapes moved within the light, more of them, converging on the fleeing boat. A tentacle whipped past Vance's head, smashing the windshield. Shards of glass sprayed. He ducked, feeling the cold, slimy appendage brush his neck. He kept the throttle jammed forward, the old boat groaning and shuddering as it plowed through the unnaturally resistant water. It felt thick, clotted. Benji was whimpering, trying to stem the bleeding from his leg. The wounds weren't just punctures. The flesh around them looked necrotic, turning a sickly gray-green, veins standing out black against his skin. He was shivering violently, his eyes glazed. Cold, so cold. He mumbled. They sang in my head. Vance glanced back. The creatures weren't giving up. They moved through the water with terrifying speed, jetting alongside the boat, their obsidian heads breaking the surface like malignant buoys. He could see their circular mouths flexing open and closed, revealing the spirals of glowing teeth. The sound wasn't audible over the engine, but he felt it. A deep, subsonic thrumming that vibrated the deck, making his teeth ache and his vision blur. It felt like pressure building inside his skull. One launched itself, clearing the stern rail. It landed with a wet slap, its multiple tentacles immediately anchoring it to the deck. It unfolded, towering over Benji, who could only stare up, paralyzed. The circular mouth dilated, opening wider than seemed possible, the inner rings of teeth glinting like shards of ice in the flare as dying light and the creature's own internal glow. Vance didn't think. He grabbed the fire axe mounted near the cabin door. With a roar born of terror and fury, he charged. He swung the axe with all his strength at the base of the creature's neck, where the obsidian head met the rubbery torso. The blade bit deep with a sickening chunk, embedding itself. Not blood, but a thick, viscous fluid, the color of crude oil mixed with pus, oozed out. The creature shrieked, a high-pitched, ultrasonic sound that felt like needles stabbing Vance's eardrums. It flailed wildly, tearing the axe from his grip as it staggered back, crashing into the rail. It teetered for a moment, then plunged overboard, taking the axe with it. The subsonic thrumming intensified. The water around the wee lady seemed to boil with the toxic green light. More shapes surfaced, dozens now, their blank heads tracking the fleeing boat. Vance saw the distant lighthouse beam sweep across the water. So close, yet impossibly far. Benji convulsed. His skin was visibly graying, taking on a waxy, translucent quality. Thin, dark lines, like veins, but wrong, spread rapidly from his wounds. He gasped, a wet, rattling sound. When he opened his eyes again, they weren't his own. They were clouded, milky white, reflecting the green glow from below. He looked at Vance, not with recognition, but with a chilling alien vacancy. His mouth worked silently. Vance felt a cold dread, worse than any fear of teeth or tentacles. The infection. The change. Whatever those things carried. It was in Benji. He made a terrible decision. He grabbed Benji, his friend, his mate for 15 years, who now felt cold and strangely yielding, like damp clay. Benji offered no resistance, just stared with those awful, milky eyes. Vance dragged him to the stern. The creatures were closing in, their green-lit forms churning the water into a phosphorescent frenzy. "Forgive me, Benji," Vance choked out, tears mixing with the spray. With a strength fueled by sheer terror, he heaved Benji over the rail. His friend hit the glowing water with a splash. For a second, he vanished. Then he surfaced, thrashing weakly, not towards the boat, but towards the converging horde of creatures. They didn't attack him. They surrounded him, their tentacles touching him almost gently. Then they pulled him under, the green glow swallowing him whole. The sacrifice bought Vance seconds, precious seconds. He turned back to the helm, sobbing, retching from the smell and the horror. He pushed the straining engine beyond its limits. The lighthouse beams swept over him, blessedly bright. He could see the breakwater. The creatures followed him almost to the shore. They stopped where the water shallowed, just beyond the reach of the lighthouse beam, their obsidian heads breaking the surface like a macabre flotilla. They watched him silent still. The toxic green glow pulsed beneath them, illuminating their horrific forms. Vance felt the pressure in his skull lessen, but the subsonic thrumming didn't stop. It faded into a background vibration, a constant, dreadful reminder. He crashed the wee lady onto the beach near the lighthouse, the hull groaning in protest. He stumbled out onto the sand, collapsing, retching up bile. Sirens wailed in the distance, drawn by his mayday, however corrupted. When the Coast Guard arrived, they found Vance huddled on the cold sand, staring blankly at the water. The wee lady was a ruin, deep gouges scored along her hull, slime glistening on her deck. Benji was gone. No trace. Vance tried to tell them. He babbled about the glow, the things, the blank heads, the teeth, Benji's eyes. He showed them the necrotic scratch on his own neck where the tentacle had grazed him. The medics exchanged worried glances. Shock, hypothermia, hallucinations brought on by toxic algae inhalation. They bandaged his neck, a perfunctory gesture. The wound felt cold, deep, and strangely numb. They searched the area. Nothing. No sign of Benji, no sign of monsters. Just the vast, dark expanse of Lake Erie, reflecting the indifferent stars. Vance watched them, his voice growing hoarse, his story sounding more insane even to his own ears with each repetition. He saw the doubt solidify in their eyes. They found the damaged sonar, the torn deck. Storm damage? One officer suggested. Collision with submerged debris? He was taken to the hospital in Sandusky. Tests were run. Exposure, minor toxins, trauma. They kept him overnight for observation. Through the window of his sterile room, he could see the lake. Calm now, dark, except just beyond the harbor lights, out near the breakwall, the water shimmered, not with moonlight, with a faint, sickly, pulsating green. It flared once, then vanished. Vance pressed his face to the cold glass, his breath fogging it. He knew what he saw. He knew they were still out there, waiting, watching, hungry. And he knew, with a chilling certainty that settled deep into his marrow like lake-bottom ice, that the scratch on his neck wasn't just a scratch. It itched fiercely now, a deep, unnatural itch. When he looked in the bathroom mirror, pulling back the bandage under the harsh fluorescent light, he saw the skin around it was gray. Thin, dark lines were beginning to spider outwards. The numbness was spreading. He heard it then, faint but undeniable beneath the hum of the hospital. A low, subsonic thrumming. A song without sound, vibrating in his bones, calling from the deep, dark water. It promised cold. It promised the embrace of the endless mud. It promised he wouldn't be alone for long. Captain Alaz Vance knew his mayday hadn't just been static. It had been a warning. And it had failed. The terrifying monsters weren't just in Lake Erie. They were in him. And the lake, vast, ancient, and infinitely patient, was reclaiming its own, one soul at a time. The glow below wasn't just a warning light. It was a beacon. And it was growing brighter every night.